This documentary covers the most famous images from Pompeii, the frozen, curled dead. You will see them entirely differently by the time this ends. We follow the only eyewitness account to survive 2,000 years into the modern era. He was 17 years old, across the bay, and wrote from memory. And we ask why the date in every history book is almost certainly wrong, and why, 2,000 years later, the official record has still not corrected it. You are standing in Pompeii, looking at what they told you is a body. It is not a body. The flesh burned away 20 centuries ago. What you are looking at is the hole a person left in the world. An archaeologist named Fiorelli found those holes in 1863 and filled them with plaster. And almost everything else you know about this city has the same problem. Pompeii in 79 AD was not a small village. Up to 20,000 people lived here in a trading city of extraordinary sophistication. Bakeries, brothels, temples, and public baths operated on every major street. The amphitheater seated 20,000, one seat for every resident, and above all of it, the volcano called Vesuvius rose gently to the north. The Romans understood Vesuvius as farmland, not as a threat. The soil on its slopes was among the richest in the Roman Empire. The volcano had not erupted in any living memory. There had been a major earthquake 17 years before that damaged much of the city. The Romans rebuilt everything, which they took as proof the worst had passed. On the morning of the eruption, the bread was still in the ovens. Merchants were arguing prices in the forum as they did every morning. A thin column of smoke above Vesuvius caught a few eyes at midday. Most who saw it turned back to their work. They had no Latin word for what was about to happen to them. Pliny the Younger was 17 years old the afternoon the sky turned dark. He had been reading in his uncle's garden at Misenum across the bay. His mother pointed to an unusual cloud forming over the mountain. Pliny later described the cloud as resembling the trunk and crown of an umbrella pine. His uncle, the Roman admiral Pliny the Elder, commanded the naval fleet at Misenum. The admiral called for a fast vessel and sailed directly toward the eruption. He brought writing materials to record what he witnessed. He never reached Pompeii. Pumice was floating so densely on the bay his ships could barely advance. He made it to shore at Stabiae, further along the coast. Back in Pompeii, pumice stones were already raining from the sky by mid-afternoon. The stones fell at a rate that made the streets impossible to cross. Some residents tied cushions to their heads with strips of cloth as crude shields. By midnight, pumice had buried the streets to a depth of over a meter. Those who had stayed inside their houses believed they were safe. At approximately 1 in the morning, the eruption column above Vesuvius collapsed. When a column of this size collapses, the force releases outward across the ground. 6 surges swept through Pompeii between 1 in the morning and dawn. The 4th surge reached temperatures of roughly 300 degrees Celsius. Modern forensic evidence confirms that at those temperatures, death was instantaneous. There was no time to suffer. The eruption had already begun transforming the city 3 hours before the column collapsed. The pumice rain had buried ground floors entirely before the first surge reached the walls. People sheltering on upper floors died when roofs gave way under the pumice load. The nearby city of Herculaneum received the surges first, at even higher temperatures. Research published in 2018 found that some victims' skulls had fractured outward from the inside. The brain fluid vaporized instantly at temperatures above 500 degrees. The Admiral Pliny the Elder was found the next morning on the beach at Stabiae. He had gone ashore to comfort survivors and could not return to his ships. His body showed no wound. Pliny the Younger described the air at Misenum as thick with debris and sulfur. Even across the bay, the sky had gone completely dark at midday. His mother wanted to flee. He insisted on staying until they knew what was happening. The toxic air had killed his uncle, according to the account he wrote years later. Here's what most accounts of Pompeii don't say. The curled bodies and open mouths are not the death poses of suffering. They are cadaveric spasm. It is the involuntary muscular contraction caused by instant death at extreme temperature. At 300 degrees, muscles seize before there is any time for consciousness to end. The people of Pompeii were not frozen in their last moment of terror. They were dead before that could happen. Then there is the date. Every history book prints August 2439 AD. That date comes from a single letter written 25 years after the event. The original manuscript no longer exists. What we have is a medieval copy, made centuries after the event. In 2018, archaeologists at Pompeii's Reggio V site found a charcoal inscription on a wall. It read, "In charcoal, the 16th day before the calends of November, October 17th. Charcoal inscriptions in open air last only weeks before fading completely. A message dated October 17 could not have survived an August eruption, still legible. Pomegranates found in the ash at Pompeii were fully ripe. Pomegranates ripen in October in southern Italy, not in August. A coin minted in summer 79 AD was found sealed in the correct ash layer. Some victims were found wearing heavier garments than midsummer Romans would use. The eruption happened in October, and 2,000 years of books got it wrong. And the bodies, the last thing. The flesh and tissue burned away in the very first surge. What Fiorelli found were cavities in the ash that preserved the shape of the absent. He pumped liquid plaster into them. What emerged was not a preserved person. It was the impression left by one. 3.5 million people live within the shadow of Vesuvius today. The volcano has not erupted since 1944. That is the longest dormant period in 3 centuries. Volcanologists are not reassured by this. The Italian government has designated a red zone directly around the mountain. 700,000 people live inside that red zone. The evacuation plan schedules them to leave within 72 hours. It has never been tested at scale. Studies project that most motorways would gridlock within hours of a real emergency. The ancient city of 20,000 was consumed in approximately 19 hours. Naples is one of the most densely populated coastal cities in Europe. The comparison between the two situations is not reassuring. What's worth sitting with here is what we built this entire account on. Pliny the Younger wrote his letters to Tacitus 25 years after the eruption. He was 17, watching from the wrong side of the bay. No other eyewitness account has survived. The date he reported is almost certainly wrong. The bodies he never saw are reconstructions poured in plaster. The plaster casts have been reproduced in books, museums, and schools for over a century. Children learn about Pompeii through them. Before they learn the word reconstruction, the image shapes the understanding before the evidence is examined. 3 million tourists walk among those reconstructions every year. They call it history. The question worth sitting with after all of this is a simple one. If the most studied disaster in history got its date wrong for 2 millennia, what else is waiting in the next charcoal inscription? The bread was still in the ovens. The prices were still being argued. The mountain had never erupted in any living memory. There was no Latin word for what it was. The word volcano was invented after Pompeii, named for Vulcan, the god of fire. The city taught the world what a volcano was. It did so in about 19 hours. And the world still cannot agree on the day it happened. New documentaries every week. Subscribe to Elena's illustrative documentary for more.